Hello, friends, and welcome to our third lesson from our book, Exploring Advent with Luke by Timothy Clayton. And this week we will continue to look at the stories of the three characters that we have been reading about and along with in the Gospel of Luke these last several weeks. Once again, we will encounter Elizabeth, mother of John the Baptist, and Mary, mother of Jesus, and then we'll have a reappearance of Zechariah, John the Baptist's father, as well. Today we will wrap up this intro section to this Christmas story here that we're using for Advent to prepare us for the Christmas season. And what we look at today will bring us all the way up to the moment that the Gospel of Luke begins to talk about the birth of Jesus Christ. So those classes that choose to meet either on the 23rd or the 30th will have another lesson that is centered around that moment and that story. But for all of us right now, we will be finishing up this part of the story that helps prepare our hearts and minds for the work that God is doing in our lives and in the world around us. And that last aspect, the idea that God is in the world around us, is exactly what we are going to focus on quite a bit today. That's why I chose to shoot this video by sitting outside in the world. Here I sit in this time of year where the leaves have fallen off the trees and it looks maybe even a little more like wilderness than it sometimes would around us. And yet, with every winter and the cold time that sets in, we always look ahead to a new spring and a renewal of life. And in many ways, that's what this next part of the story is. It's the anticipation of Elizabeth and Mary for the births of their two children, and the pronouncement that renewal and new life will be coming into the world through their children. And so that's kind of what we will be focusing on as we get into these last two stories for this preparation time, this Advent season. So we'll pick up first where we left off last week, and Elizabeth and Mary will greet one another when Mary comes to visit Elizabeth and spend some time there with her. And we will hear some about their encounter, the joy that fills that moment. And then we will look specifically at Mary's song at the Magnificat. That is one of the canticles that sort of helps us understand what Luke's ideas are about what it means for God's presence to be at work in the world, and what it means for the world to be favored by God's presence, not even just Mary or Elizabeth. And then we will move on also to the story that wraps up what we find out about Zechariah. We were met with Zechariah a few weeks ago when the announcement of John's birth is made to both him and Elizabeth. And we found out that Zechariah asks, basically, how can this be possible? And that the angel Gabriel actually silences him, and he spends the duration of Elizabeth's pregnancy in silence. Maybe not even by choice, but nevertheless, it prepares his heart to accept what it is that God is doing. And so we will hear about Zechariah at the end of the pregnancy and the birth of John the Baptist, and how he demonstrates his faith in what is going on, his trust in God's work in their lives, and how he actually regains his voice. And then, just like Mary has a canticle or a song that gives us some insight into how John understands the workings of God in the world, so too we will get that with Zechariah. And Zechariah will have a canticle as well that he gives in the text, and that gives us some more insight into what it is that they are hopeful for in the renewal that is going to come through the message of John the Baptist and then through the ministry of Jesus. And of course, we hear that all of this starts to create hubbub in the region of Judea, that people are anticipating themselves and starting to wonder, what is it that's going on and what could be possible. And so it's the first sort of hints that something is going on that affects not just these regular people, but God is doing a work amongst them that's going to spread out into the world. And it will be announced first through John the Baptist in the wilderness and his call to repentance and turning back to God, and then in the fulfillment of Jesus' arrival and ministry and death and resurrection. And so I hope you enjoy finishing out these preparatory stories today as we draw closer to Christmas Day. And I look forward to seeing you again next week if you come back to class and choose to have class next week.